Random House Audio presents Dr. Zhivago by Boris Pasternak. Translated from the Russian by Richard Pevear and Larissa Volokhonsky, with an afterword by Richard Pevear. Read for you by John Lee. Translator's Notes. Russian names are composed of first name, patronymic, from the father's first name, and family name. Formal address requires the use of the first name and patronymic. Diminutives are commonly used among family and friends. The family name alone can also be used familiarly, and on occasion only the patronymic is used, usually among the lower classes. Principal characters: Yuri Andreevich Zhivago, Yura, Yurochka. Larissa Fyodorovna Gishar, married name Antipova, Lara, Larochka. Antonina Alexandrovna Gromeko, married name Zhivago, Tonya, Tonechka. Pavel Pavlovich Antipov, Pasha, Pashka, Pashenka, Pavlushka, Patulya, Patulechka. Inokenti Dementievich Dudarov, Nika. Mikhail Grigoryevich Gordon, Misha. Viktor Ippolitovich Komarovsky, no diminutives. Evgraf Andreevich Zhivago, Grania. There is an extraordinary play with the names of minor characters in the novel. They are all plausible, but often barely so, and they sometimes have an oddly specific meaning. For instance, there is Maxim Aristarkovich Klintsov Pogorevshik, whose name has a rather aristocratic ring, until you come to Pogorevshik, which means burned down. Others are simply tongue-twisters: Anfim Efimovich Samdevyatov, or Rufina Onissimovna Voitkovskaya. There are too many of these names for us to comment on them, but the Russianless reader should know that for Russian readers too they are strange and far-fetched, and that Pasternak clearly meant them to be so. Dmitry Bykov, in his Boris Pasternak, Moscow, 2007, thinks they suggest a realm alien to Zhivago, deep Siberia, the city outskirts, and almost a different breed of man. The place names for the parts of the novel set in the Moscow region and western Russia are real. The place names in the Urals, Uryatin, Varikino, Rinva, are fictional. And there is a corresponding difference in worlds, the one more historical, the other more folkloric. The novel moves from the one to the other and back again. There is also a double sense of time, marked by two different calendars, civil and church festal, the first linear, the second cyclical. Sometimes the most mundane moment suddenly acquires another dimension, as when the narrator, describing the end of a farewell party, says, "The house soon turned into a sleeping kingdom." We have tried to match as closely as possible the wide range of voices, the specific cadences, and the sudden shifts of register in Pasternak's prose. The poems of Yuri Zhivago, which make up the final part of the novel, are not merely an addendum. They are inseparable from the whole and its true outcome, what remains, what endures. Some clearly reflect moments in the novel. We even overhear Zhivago working on several of them. But it is a mistake to try to pinpoint each poem to a specific passage or event in the novel. In translating them, we have let the meaning guide us and have welcomed poetry when it has offered itself. We have sacrificed rhyme, but have tried to keep the rhythm, especially when it is as important as it is in A Wedding, which is modeled on a popular song form called the chastushka. Above all, we have tried to keep the tone and terseness of the originals, which are often intentionally prosaic. Book 1. Part 1. The 5 o'clock Express. 1. They walked and sang Memory Eternal, and whenever they stopped, the singing seemed to be carried on by their feet, the horses, the gusts of wind. Passers-by made way for the cortege. counted the wreaths, crossed themselves. The curious joined the procession, asked, "Who's being buried?" "Zhivago," came the answer. "So that's it. Now I see. Not him. Her. It's all the same. God rest her soul. A rich funeral." The last minutes flashed by, numbered, irrevocable. "The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and those who dwell therein." The priest, tracing a cross, threw a handful of earth onto Maria Nikolaevna. They sang with the souls of the righteous. A terrible bustle began. The coffin was closed, nailed shut, lowered in. A rain of clods drummed down as 4 shovels hastily filled the grave. Over it a small mound rose. A 10-year-old boy climbed onto it. Only in the state of torpor and insensibility that usually comes at the end of a big funeral could it have seemed that the boy wanted to speak over his mother's grave. He raised his head and looked around from that height at the autumn wastes and the domes of the monastery with an absent gaze. His snub-nosed face became distorted, his neck stretched out. If a wolf cub had raised his head with such a movement, it would have been clear that he was about to howl. Covering his face with his hands, the boy burst into sobs. A cloud flying towards him began to lash his hands and face with the wet whips of a cold downpour. A man in black, with narrow, tight-fitting, gathered sleeves, approached the grave. This was the deceased woman's brother and the weeping boy's uncle, Nikolai Nikolaevich Vedanyapin, a priest defrocked at his own request. He went up to the boy and led him out of the cemetery. 2. They spent the night in one of the monastery guest rooms, allotted to the uncle as an old acquaintance. It was the eve of the protection. The next day he and his uncle were to go far to the south, to one of the provincial capitals on the Volga, where Father Nikolai worked for a publisher who brought out a local progressive newspaper. The train tickets had been bought, the luggage was tied up and standing in the cell. From the nearby station the wind carried the plaintive whistling of engines maneuvering in the distance. Towards evening it turned very cold. The 2 ground-level windows gave onto the corner of an unsightly kitchen garden, surrounded by yellow acacia bushes, onto the frozen puddles of the road going past, and onto the end of the cemetery where Maria Nikolaevna had been buried that afternoon. The kitchen garden was empty, except for a few moiré patches of cabbage, blue from the cold. When the wind gusted, the leafless acacia bushes thrashed about as if possessed, and flattened themselves to the road. During the night, Yura was awakened by a tapping at the window. The dark cell was supernaturally lit up by a fluttering white light. In just his nightshirt, Yura ran to the window and pressed his face to the cold glass. Beyond the window there was no road, no cemetery, no kitchen garden. A blizzard was raging outside. The air was smoky with snow. One might have thought the storm noticed Yura and, knowing how frightening it was, revelled in the impression it made on him. It whistled and howled and tried in every way possible to attract Yura's attention. From the sky, endless skeins of white cloth, turn after turn, fell on the earth, covering it in a winding sheet. The blizzard was alone in the world. Nothing rivaled it. Yura's first impulse, when he got down from the windowsill, was to get dressed and run outside to start doing something. He was afraid now that the monastery cabbage would be buried and never dug out, now that Mama would be snowed under and would be unable to resist going still deeper and further away from him into the ground. Again, it ended in tears. His uncle woke up, spoke to him of Christ and comforted him, then yawned, went to the window, and fell to thinking. They began to dress. It was getting light. 3. While his mother was alive, Yura did not know that his father had abandoned them long ago, had gone around various towns in Siberia and abroad, carousing and debauching, and that he had long ago squandered and thrown to the winds the millions of their fortune. Yura was always told that he was in Petersburg or at some fair. Most often.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?